ये आवाज है राष्ट्रवाद की, ये चैनल है राष्ट्रवादियों की। यहां दहाड़ेंगे हम राष्ट्रवाद।
Jai Hind, Namaste, and good morning from Bharat, that is India. The India that had preached to the world thousands of years back when many present civilizations were not even born. Sarv Dharav Sambhava, let all religions flourish. Vasudev Kutumbakam, that the whole world is a family. And today, in spite of massive exploitation, massacres, invasions, and slavery, we stand today as the fourth biggest economy in the world. We stand today under a government which keeps the national interest at its prime and is able to answer fittingly to the biggest power in the world, America. We were the first to come out from COVID. We were the first to move our economy on the track. And we were the first to recover and make our GDP move forward. The biggest rising middle class in the world today. The advances being made by ISRO in the field of space, our IT experts all over the world, our self-sufficiency in food grains, the self-sufficiency we have attained in our defense. And yet, there are some voices who say that India never existed. It was only in 1947 that India was created, including some of our political jokers in India who say that. It's high time, and that is why I'm speaking in English today to make the younger generation in the world know what India has been and what India stands for. Look at this map. This is a map of 3rd century BC. What the geographical boundaries of India were. And incidentally, I have not created the map. This has been created by British historians, accepted worldwide as the map of the Mauryan Empire in India, the great Magad Empire in India. An empire which even Alexander could not dare to invade, went back from the peripheral boundaries, which Seleucus could not dare to invade, was defeated, gave his daughter in marriage to the Maurya king Chandragupta, gave an ambassador, Megasthenes, who stayed in India for long, and wrote about India and Indica at that time of the Greeks. The ancient Indian texts, the classics, the four Vedas, Rig Veda, composed at a time when even many of the present civilizations were not born, describe the geographical boundaries of India, Bharat. There are compositions in those who say in the north are the snow-clad mountains, that is the Himalayas. In the south is the ocean, that is Indian Ocean. And remember, at that time, when there were no satellites, there was no cartography, no maps, this geographical description is given of Bharat. Or look at the Purans. There is a book by a geography professor from Aligarh Muslim University. Ali, Professor Ali, on geography of Purans, written sometime in 8th to 10th century AD, written. The oral tradition comes much earlier, in which virtually the geography of the whole world is given. How come the Indians knew of 7 continents? And from Jambu Deep, Bharatvarsh, the ancient names, to the Indica of Greeks. This word India comes from Indica, which they used in 6th century BC. From the writings of Strabo to Pliny to Megasthenes to Plato, everyone, every Greek is mentioning. And you know what these Greek write-ups say about India? Their Indica. That is Shraman and an elephant are the 2 major things from India which we need. Shramans, Brahmans, used for both Hindu and Jain, learned ones by the Westerners. We need one. That was India's ancient knowledge. And they need an elephant for their warfare. And this thing continues. The Chinese, when Buddhism spread from India world over, whether it was Huensang, whether it was Yuan Shikai, whether it was Huensang, whether it was Yixing, or other Chinese travelers, they were traveling to India in search of knowledge, in search of Buddhist relics. And who gave the name Hindustan? Where the Hindus stay. The Turks, the Arabs, who invaded Hindustan, who coined this term, Ghazwa-e-Hind. We have to conquer India. We have to kill the Kafirs there, enslave them, or convert them to Islam, which continues even today in their thoughts and actions of terrorism. And mind it, these Islamist invaders were not coming to conquer Jaipur or Jodhpur or Delhi or Gujarat, Ahmedabad, Baroda. They were coming to conquer Hindustan. The total Hindustan. The Mughal Badshahs can never rule over Hindustan. Northeast was not a part of their empire. South India was not a part of their empire. Many other places. And yet they called themselves Badshah of Hindustan. What was this? If Hindustan didn't exist. I would like my listeners to know a place named Hindu Kush. right after Afghanistan. And you know what Hindu Kush means? Hindu Kush means where the Hindus were massacred. That was India up to that place. Come to more later times. India was not lost anywhere. What were Columbus and Vasco da Gama searching for? In history books, we are told they were searching for India. India was not lost somewhere. India was very much there. They were only searching a sea route to India to carry their trade. Or as some Christian scholars say, that after the Islamist invasions of Europe, they were sent to find allies in other parts of the world to fight the invaders. And what they were searching was the route to India, as I said, not the Malabar coast. Why that point was called Good Hope? Because then Vasco da Gama felt, good hope now I can find the route to India. And their description only shows that the ship of the Indian merchant was much larger than the ship of the Vasco da Gama. And when he kept and met that local ruler Jamorin, he had found the sea route to India. And that's how this whole trading in this aspect started. And if there was no India, then why all these European countries named their trading companies as English East India Company, French East India Company, Dutch East India Company, Portuguese East India Company? And then the French, the Portuguese, and the British, the Spaniards, they fought wars in India with each other to conquer India. Tell me one more thing. Why, if India didn't exist, what was the British Indian Empire? Why did the British called it the most glittering jewel in the British crown, the Indian Empire, if India didn't exist? And this British India, after 1857, had two components. One, the British Indian provinces. The other, British Indian princely states. They were not independent countries. They were only British Indian princely states. That was the British Empire in India. And that is why in 47, the British converted these princely states into independent countries when they say paramountcy has left, and left it to these states individually to join an Indian, any union, Pakistan, when they bifurcated India, partitioned India, created this rogue state of Pakistan. Now they are trying in England what the Pakistani rape gangs are doing there. That was India. And here I raise a question to some foolish Indian politicians who saying that India was created in 47 only. Then tell me one thing. particularly these leaders from the Congress party, when you claim you are fighting for India's freedom struggle, if India didn't exist, then for whose freedom struggle for you're fighting? What was Jawaharlal Nehru discovering when he wrote the discovery of India, if India didn't exist? Well, these foolish constructions which are made. Yes, India became a republic. India became a democratic state. But you can't understand the unity of India from the Western models. And even if you apply the Western models, tell me one thing. What was Germany? When Bismarck, the Chancellor of Prussia, fought against Australia and France for German unification. Before that, what was German? An idea only for them. Why? That culturally, geographically, it was believed that this is Germany. And that is why Bismarck unified Germany. And the European scholars praise it. Unification of Germany, we were taught. Same about Italy. What was Italy? What was Mazzini and Garibaldi unifying? Because they too were under the Australian influence. Habsburg Empire. And Italy too was unified in 1870. And that unification we Lord appreciate. That now Germany is unified. Now Italy is unified. But when it comes to India, then no nation existed. Then that way no Germany existed. No Italy existed. Now the question comes. Why did this distortion start? And particularly by the British. On the one hand, they boasted of having the Indian Empire, British Indian Empire. And on the other hand, John Strachey, I think he is the best to quote among these, those who encouraged colonial psyche in India of domination, from Charles Grant to James Mill and many others till 1947, whether they were Orientalists, utilitarians or Indologists. I quote John Strachey. This is first and foremost thing to learn about India, that there is not and never was an India, or even any country of India possessing, according to European ideas, any sort of unity, physical, social, religious. So no Indian nation, no people of India, of which we hear so much. Strachey, what nonsense and rubbish are you talking? Why did then you challenge that the Britishers should not call it Indian Empire? And again he is talking European ideas. Well, European ideas are not the supreme in the world. The Orient has its own culture, its own polity, its own definitions. He says there is no unity, physical, social and religious. Totally absent. How come there the Hindu pilgrim centers are right there in the Himalayas? From Kashmir to Uttarakhand and then Rameshwaram down south. Or in the east to west. But he says there was no religious unity. Social, the social structure same. People of India. He says, there are no people of India. Then whom are you ruling on? Why are your records saying Indian people? Why your records say Indian courts, Indian laws, Indian regulations, and even the forced indentured laborers that you force out of India, many freedom fighters, many you enticed, many you lured, many abducted and sent on ships 10,000 miles away. Why they were called Indian indentured laborers? Why? And why they retained their Indian culture even today? It's flourishing there. They can't answer this. Now, what was the reason for this distortion? The British realized it very well. That here in India, they're not going to rule over jungles or illiterate people and all that, or an inferior culture. They knew that they were against a living culture that is there for thousands of years. Even if now you go to Varanasi, the oldest city in the world, with all the continuity. They realized that the Indian intellect, and they realized what the Indian sciences were, what Indian medicine was, what Indian education system was. Compare the literacy rates in India before the British introduced their education system here, the Gurukuls of India. An overall development of the human being that was taught there. Don't forget, it was India which invented the zero, the decimal. Thousands of years back, the distances which the Indians calculated in the universe, today NASA is saying they are 99.9% correct. It's not me saying that. But the problem with the British was that unless they demean this, unless they show their supremacy as they wanted to say, as the white man's burden to civilize the world, because civilization according to them meant only what their civilization is. They had to distort Indian history and Indian traditions, Indian culture, Indian intellect. Why were they so afraid of Brahmins? That even in the plantation colonies, Guyana, from British Guyana, they deported Brahmins. Because saying that they are the ones who instigate these devas to protest and fight. There are many more instances like that. So they had to distort. And they, along with certain missionaries, played a major role in that. And yet, India's knowledge survives and the world acknowledges today. Then there was another person who contributed much more to the distortion about India. And that was this great Karl Marx. Friends, this Karl Marx never visited India. I doubt whether he had met some Indians also. I mean the Indians intellectuals or something. His whole understanding of India was based on what Europeans were writing about India. Distortions, demeaning India, everything in India being declared mythological, myths. And that is where he writes, going steps ahead than stressing. In July 22nd, 1853, he wrote, and I'm reading this out. Indian society has no history at all, at least no known history. What we call its history is but the history of successive intruders who founded their empires on the passive basis of the unresisting and unchanging society. He calls it unchanging and unresisting society. Then he adds, the question therefore is not whether the English had a right to conquer India, but whether we are to prefer India conquered by the Turks, by the Persian, by the Russian, to India conquered by the Briton. England had to fulfill a double mission in India, one destructive, the other regenerating, the annihilation of old Asiatic society and the laying of the material foundations of Western society. And this Karl Marx, this is how he justifies, he calls himself a Marxist, and he is justifying the British occupation of India, the colonization of India, he is justifying. This is what Marxism is. And then he goes on to say about Indian religion, Hindu religion, and thus brought about a brutalizing worship of nature, exhibiting its degradation in the fact that man, the sovereign of nature, fell down on his knees in adoration of Hanuman, the monkey, and Sabala, the cow. Mr. Marx, why today whole world is now talking of nature? Why? Can any Marxist answer me? Yes, we worship nature. We believe in development in harmony with nature, not by exploiting nature. The biggest contrast between the Western and the Oriental concepts and thinking about nature. We call the earth our mother. A mother which feeds us. That's why we call India as Mother India. But these distortions continue. And I want to ask you, it is claimed one should be scientific. Yes, one not only should be, one has to be scientific. And what is the first principle of sciences? You experiment, you research. You can't just set aside something as mythology and forget it and laugh at it. This is what was done to the Indian sciences, describing them as myths, describing the ancient Indian cities as imaginary without experimenting. And the Marxist historians contributed in a big way in this. That Ramayana is myth, Mahabharata is myth, Dwarka is myth, Saraswati is myth. Now what happened? When through marine archaeology, the entire city of Dwarka has been discovered underwater near Dwarka. Or of the Mahabharata period, even the bodies and the chariots have been found. The first hilted copper sword in the world has been found. Then these distorted historians, colonial apologists and Marxists, won't utter a word. And this continues. However, in opposition to this colonial psyche of dominance, they resisted. They emerged as the Indian psyche of resistance. They declared 1857 as a mere Sipahi revolt, or the Marxists called it only a feudal revolt. And what have the researchers shown now? It was the combined India which fought. Though Disraeli had pointed at that time that it is just a Sepoy mutiny or a national revolt. And today researchers prove that. It was a national revolt all over India with all sections of the society participating in it. And four letters of that time, written to the Tsar Alexander II of Russia and delivered at Rist in Iran by Rao Tularam from India, who was sent as an emissary in 1858. One letter written by him himself, seeking assistance from Russia to liberate India from the British yoke, and three important letters. One written by the Prince of Jaipur, the other by Prince of Jodhpur, and the third by the Prince of Bikaner. Signed 29th August 1859 and 1st September 1859. Addressed to the Tsar of Russia. And you know what is the crucial part in those letters? All these letters are saying, assist us in liberating India, Bharat, from the British yoke. They are not saying, assist us in liberating Jaipur or Jodhpur or Bikaner or Awadh or any other province. Which gives a total new dimension. That is why we call it our first freedom struggle. That is Bharat. For long, these distortions were tolerated. But now, the new India has wakened up. Today, the younger generation wants to know what our ancient sciences were. Why is the people running after Ayurveda today? Or yoga? The Britishers themselves acknowledged that plastic surgery was from India. And thus, these new challenges have not only done away the distortions of colonial historiography and Marxist historiography, and I call it a nationalist historiography. One should not be an apologetic terms, say rightist. No, there's nothing like a rightist. There is this nationalist historiography. And same communists, I ask one question. If India didn't exist till 47, then why did you form the Communist Party of India in 1925? And you, who denounced nationalism as a bourgeois concept, then how come you formed your parties based on national identities? Hypocrites. And today, you want to create anarchy, disrupt India. There are many aspects one can go on into this. Yes, there were many Westerners also who were able to acknowledge what India was. And they wrote about it. The book which E.L. Basham wrote, Australian, The Wonder That Was India, and many others. The problem is that our advocating peace and harmony, our talking of international brotherhood, is taken as our weakness. Sorry, forget it. You can't treat it as our weakness. And today the same India, when it has moved ahead, is now treated as a threat by America. The Indian sciences, the Indian brains, the Indian defense systems. That is the India of today now. Self-sufficient, strong in defense, culturally strong, morally strong, and leading the world against the fight to curb Islamist terrorists in India. We don't create terrorists like America did by creating Taliban or hobnobbing with terrorists. Because we have realized that terrorism, the fanatic terrorism, is a much bigger threat to the world than atom bombs. So friends, we stand for peace. I've tried to explain to you what India is. It is the most ancient country with a continuity in its culture, in spite of many many attempts to destroy it. The Islamic intruders couldn't do it. They massacred many. They killed many. They enslaved many. But like many other countries where their sword could succeed, they failed in India to convert India. Some of the missionaries also tried it. In 1830, some missionaries had written to the Pope that in the next 50 years, whole of India will be converted. They failed. Because there is something in India. And we are proud to be Indians. Don't underestimate our thrust for peace as our weakness. And today we stand as a strong nation in the world, which is providing now leadership to those third world countries, those countries of the south, those underdeveloped countries who have been bulldozed and blackmailed and subjugated by the Western powers. And we'll continue to make a better world. Jai Hind.